Okay, good morning everyone. Welcome back from the long weekend. Welcome to Tuesday. If you're here in Vancouver, you'll see, again, it's a very beautiful day. I think we've had quite a string of beautiful days, maybe like a week or two, but it's nice. I hope everyone had a little relaxing break. I hope you weren't working the whole time, although I could imagine that you have a bunch of stuff due at this time of year, so I'm sure you were busy, but we're real close. We're almost there. So who's here this morning? So Aliana's here. Good morning, Aliana. Lily's here. Good morning, Lily. Casey is here. Hello again, Casey. Pearly's here. Morning, Pearly. Good morning again. Good morning again, Karen. Good morning again, Miss Sheed. Hello, Min. Good morning. Good evening to you, Ella. Jenna's here. Good morning, Jenna. And Cindy is here. Cindy is here as well. Cindy, I was out for a walk last night and I think I walked right by you, but I'm not sure because I've never seen you in real life. But I think I did. So what we'll do today, again, we're almost done here, and what we're going to do is hello, Manish. What we're going to do is we're going to map out the end of the Roman Republic, and so things are becoming increasingly crazy in Rome. The Republic is starting to break down. Lots of prominent politicians and military generals who are thirsting for power and glory are going to continue to abuse the Republic for their own ends, for their own economic and trying to gain sort of financial benefit and glory and power. So they're going to abuse the functioning of the Republic until, as you've just seen, one man manages to emerge victorious over everyone for a short period of time. And of course that man is Julius Caesar, who you've probably heard of. So Ying is here. Good morning, Ying. Good morning, Adalbert. And hello again, Jimmy. Let's jump into this. So on last week, we were talking about hello again, Pika. Last week we were talking about Rome, and we said Rome had these three periods, right? Monarchy, Republic, and Empire. And so as you can see here, we're right at the end of the Republic. We're kind of in about 50 BCE, and so by this time, Rome has been a republic for almost 500 years. For much of that time, it has been functioning well. But of course, as you can see, it is no longer functioning very well anymore. Good morning, Michael. So early in the Roman Republic, we said that the Romans overthrew a king, right? They overthrew an Etruscan king named Tarquin, and the power of that king passed to two consuls, right? And the consuls were elected once a year. They were commanders-in-chief of the army, and they were kind of in charge of the Roman government. And the two consuls could only serve for a year, and they always had to be in agreement, right? That's what kept one of them from taking too much power, is that there were always two. We said that there were a lot of magistrates that were elected for various administrative purposes in the Roman Republic. And of course, we said there were patricians and plebeians, right? We said that initially there was only patricians could run for political office, but as time went on, plebeians gained some access to political positions as well. And so probably most clearly in the office of tribune, right? And we said that the tribunes were elected by the plebeians and they had the power of veto, right? They could forbid, they could keep laws from being passed. Yeah, so this was the way that the Roman Republic was set up to work, right? Patricians and plebeians who were elected to an assembly. The assembly decided on major issues, but also elected the consuls. There were tribunes that again could veto certain laws. There were a bunch of magistrates throughout the Republic that were in charge of various government operations. And then there was a Senate, right? And the Senate was composed of retired magistrates and retired consuls who provided advice to the elected consuls and passed laws and did various other things as well. And again, we said that you had to climb this cursus honorum, this kind of ladder, in order to hopefully become consul. If you were very skilled and talented and lucky, you could eventually make it to consul, and of course that would be you'd get a huge amount of prestige and respect, and of course your family would as well, and your family would, for generations after, would tell stories of their ancestor who was once a consul of Rome. We said another thing that's happening in this early republic is that the Roman state grew very significantly. There were a series of wars with Carthage, right? And Carthage was on the northern coast of Africa. And so the Romans fight 3 big wars with the Carthaginians and eventually win the wars and destroy Carthage. And at the same time, they defeat Philip V of Macedon, and so they bring that area under their control as well. And so kind of in the early Republic, Rome has expanded all the way through Greece and Asia Minor. They've taken over all of Italy, and they've taken over parts of what's the Romans call Gaul. And so Gaul is just kind of the northeastern area of Europe outside of Italy. Today, of course, we know it as France and as Spain, but the Romans called it Gaul, and they were full of Gauls, which as the Romans called them. So again, the Romans continued to expand throughout their Republican history. They would create much in the way of literature and art, and which I don't think we're going to get to, shockingly. But what was happening is that as the Republic continued to grow, the power structure starts to crack and struggle, because the Republic was created in order to, the Roman Republic was created to rule a small city-state, right? It wasn't meant to rule huge portions of the Mediterranean, which the Romans were now taking over. They set up a system of provinces with governors, and the Senate appoints governors to go out there for a term of 1 to 5 years and rule that province. And so that's kind of how they managed to rule this large area. But Roman governors, once they're out there, they're kind of free to do whatever they want. And so many of these provincial governments or governors start wars in order to gain money or to gain glory, which, spoiler alert, is exactly what Julius Caesar does. He gets appointed as governor of Cisalpine Gaul, I believe, and he goes up there and starts a 10-year war with the Gauls in order to gain money and prestige, which he definitely does. Okay. So we have a few things happening here. So again, Rome has a very complex structure to its republic. It works well for a small city-state, but as the empire continues to grow, it begins to struggle. There's an increasing gap between rich Romans and poor Romans, and it becomes ever more competitive for rich Romans to try to gain power and glory by abusing the republican system. And so on Friday, we walked through these questions here, these 6 questions, and you told me there was a few important things to remember. So we had these 2 guys, the GRACCHI. The first one, Tiberius Sempronius Gracchus, who he's a tribune, and he proposes this law to redistribute land from rich Romans to poorer Romans. He thinks that this will, of course, help poor Romans to gain some economic footing, right? They'll be able to kind of enrich themselves and live better lives. But also because you have to own land at this point to be in the Roman military, this will actually allow more people to serve. Of course, the rich Romans don't really like this idea because they know that they're going to lose some of their land in order to give it to the poor Romans. And so the sort of rich, powerful Romans in the Senate oppose Tiberius Gracchus and his agrarian law here. And he basically, this Gracchus here gets accused of trying to make himself a king, right? He gets this law passed in the plebeian council. The senators are enraged and they club him to death with whatever they can find in the Senate hall. And so this apparently is the first instance of political violence in ancient Rome, but as you have probably seen so far, it is definitely not the last. So Tiberius Gracchus is dead, but then 10 years later along comes his younger brother, Gaius Gracchus. And Gaius proposes some of the same things. He wants to redistribute land to poorer Romans, but he also wants to give Roman citizenship to people outside of Rome, so Rome's Italian allies. He gets a lot of support from the people for these reforms. And again, the Senate and the consul at the time, one of the consuls at the time, they get nervous. And so they pass this final decree of the Senate, allowing consuls to do whatever is necessary to safeguard the state. Gaius Gracchus knows that this is basically going to result in his murder or execution, and he kills himself. And so we said this whole episode with these two Gracchuses, these two Gracchi, shows that there's an increasing conflict between rich and poor in the Roman state. And so, again, Rome is getting richer and richer and richer as it takes over more land, but that isn't making all Romans richer. It's just making some richer. Some people are getting poorer. And so the wealth of the Roman Republic is not trickling down to the little people. It's staying with the most powerful Romans. So we see a conflict between the rich and the poor. We see Roman senators willing to resort to violence to get their way in Roman politics. And again, this is a pretty disturbing development, right? Democracy is supposed to be about discussion and debate and voting. It's not supposed to be about mob violence. And so here we see some pretty frightening things as senators actually beat a man to death in the Senate for doing something that they don't like. Good morning, Carmen. So again, imagine if you will, in the US government, imagine Nancy Pelosi beating Mitch McConnell to death in the Senate with, a broken chair leg, right? That's a horrific thing to imagine, but that's what's starting to happen here in Rome. We learned on Friday, about Gaius Marius. He's a pretty prominent Roman, comes from a good... No, he doesn't come from a good family. He comes from a family outside of Rome, but he does manage to win a number of successive consulships. So remember, this wasn't supposed to be possible, right? You were supposed to be consul once for a year, and then you'd have to wait another 10 years to be consul again. And so, again, most people who were consul in the early Republic didn't really live long enough to become consul again. But Marius, I think, is consul 6 or 7 times in a row. So clearly some of those rules from the early Republic are being thrown out the window. And so, again, his popularity and his military success put him kind of above the law and allow him to do whatever he wants. He reforms the Roman military in a number of ways. And one of the things that he does that's very important here is this last point. He makes generals responsible for providing land to their troops in retirement. So if you're a Roman soldier in Gaius Marius's times, your retirement plan, your pension, if you will, doesn't come from the Roman state. It comes from your Roman general. It comes from your commander. So the effect of this is that soldiers become very, very loyal to their generals and not to the Roman state, right? Because again, when you're ready to retire back to your farm and just kind of relax in your old age after a long career in the military, your general is the one who's going to provide you with the land you need, not the Roman state. So Roman generals who have an army behind them, those armies are wildly loyal to the general, not so much to the Roman state. And this proves to be pretty damaging for Rome. And a perfect example of this is Sulla, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, right? So Sulla, again, is a consul in about 88 BC. The Romans had to deal with a problematic Parthian king called Mithridates. And the Senate was going to send Sulla as general to deal with Mithridates, but Marius didn't like that idea, and so he overturned the decision and he kicked Sulla out of Rome. But again, as I just mentioned, all of these guys have armies behind them that are wildly loyal to the general, and so Sulla turns around and marches on Rome. So he brings his army into Rome and basically takes what he wants. He takes the command against Mithridates. He goes off and wins the war and becomes very, very rich, comes back in 83 BC, declares himself dictator for 3 years, and then rounds up his political enemies and executes them. So this is pretty extreme behavior, right? This is not democratic behavior functioning well. This is a military overthrow of the state by a Roman general. And so again, imagine a military general using United States troops against the United States in order to gain power. This is crazy stuff that's happening. So again, increasingly we have powerful men with big armies behind them who are very willing to use their army and violence and with no regard for the rules at all in order to gain power and glory for themselves. And so again, Marius here, who's a successful military commander, manages to get himself elected consul 6 times. He has a conflict with Sulla, but Sulla defeats him and becomes a dictator for 3 years. And again, we haven't really talked too much about him, but we have Pompey. Pompey is a successful general in a slave revolt against Rome, the sort of Spartacus revolution. Pompey makes a name for himself there, and he gets himself elected as consul as well, even though he's like 25 at the time, 25 years old, and has never had any other political offices. So Pompey becomes consul, and he hasn't sort of climbed the cursus honorum. He hasn't really climbed that ladder. He's not old enough, but somehow he manages to get the consulship anyway. So again, things are getting really chaotic here. Lots of civil wars, lots of violence. We have armies marching on Rome, Roman armies marching on Rome in order to get their generals whatever they want, basically. And so we didn't really talk about this earlier, but we should probably talk about it now. The idea that Rome's traditions have suffered here. Originally, in the early Republic, the Romans valued service and sacrifice to Rome, right? So remember, in the early Roman Republic, your your obligations were toward Rome and toward the gods, and then toward your family, and then toward yourself, right? So above all, Rome was to be served, and then the gods were to be served, and then your family was to be served, and then only you at the end. But really what we see here is that many of these powerful men are simply acting in ways that enrich themselves and that gain them money and property and glory and power, right? And they're doing whatever they want, regardless of what is or isn't good for Rome. I think I'll leave this patron-client system. It's actually important, but we didn't really talk about it, so I'm just going to leave it alone for now. Yeah, we see these generals increasingly flouting tradition to pursue power and glory. So again, Sulla uses his army to execute his political opponents and to secure the command against Mithridates that makes him a very wealthy man. And again, Pompey does the same thing. He uses his army to win a slave revolt, but then uses his army to push his way into the consulship. He somewhat famously, at one point, Pompey says something like, don't dictate the laws to me. I'm the one with the sword, right? So you can see Pompey is not at all interested in respecting tradition or law. He's just going to take what he wants because he has a powerful army, right? But again, despite the enrichment of Rome, many people are quite poor. And actually, there's a lot of people in Rome in this late republic who are they're basically on welfare. And so the Roman state is importing massive quantities of grain just to feed people who don't have any land or any money. And so again, there's this collection of powerful generals and senators at the top of society who are fighting it out with armies and becoming rich and executing their political enemies. And then there's a huge quantity of Romans at the bottom of society that actually don't have jobs and can't even afford to eat. The state is giving them food daily in order to sort of allow them to survive. And so as a result, we have a political environment here that is increasingly dysfunctional and crazy and with lots of fighting and lots of violence. And so that brings us to this guy here, Gaius Julius Caesar. And so Caesar's kind of born into this environment. And so even though the late Republic has become very bizarre and very dysfunctional, this is kind of the only Roman Republic that Caesar knows. In his early career, he's actually a lawyer. And from all reports, he was actually a very good one. He was an excellent public speaker and very persuasive. In his early political career, he got a lot of public support because he put on lavish gladiator games. He was one of the political offices he held. I think he was quaestor or something. And it was his responsibility to run these gladiator games. And so he borrowed huge sums of money to put on these fantastic gladiator games. And of course, the people were very impressed and loved him for it. A little bit later on, he became Pontifex Maximus. We talked about that, the high priest of Rome. And that, of course, brings us to the questions that I asked you today. So. The textbook talks about this first triumvirate. So who's in this triumvirate and why? Why are they in it? Okay, so Cindy here says, there's three men in the triumvirate. Okay, so tri is three. There's three men, and it's an alliance, right? So these three guys are going to team up. At first, you're right. It's kind of a secret backroom deal that nobody knows about. But in time, it becomes public knowledge that these three guys are cooperating, right? Yeah, Cicero calls it a triumvirate. Good. Jimmy says the triumvirate was founded by two people who were disappointed with their political careers. We have Crassus and Pompey, and they form an alliance with Gaius Julius Caesar. Yeah. So we've got three guys in here. So Crassus is, what is it, Marcus? Is it Marcus Licinius Crassus? Crassus is another, he's another general. He was a successful general in that Spartacus slave revolt. So Crassus got a lot of prestige out of that. At the time of the triumvirate, Crassus is kind of an older guy, but he's very rich, he's very powerful, but he still needs some favors from the Senate. He needs to be able to get the Senate to do what he wants. We have Pompey, right? And Pompey also was part of that war against the slaves, the slave revolt. He's a lot younger than Crassus, but again, he managed to get himself elected consul, and there are things that Pompey wants as well in terms of continuing to gain more power and more money. And then we have this relative newcomer to politics, Caesar. And Caesar is, again, kind of an up-and-comer, but he's held a few political offices, and he has a lot of public support. The public really like Caesar. And so he manages to get himself elected consul, and these three guys team up in order to get the things that they want. So yeah, we have three guys. We have Crassus, an older general, Pompey, a younger general, and then Caesar, an up-and-comer, a young up-and-comer, but he has a lot of support from the people. And again, he gets himself elected consul. So these guys kind of help each other out for a while. Crassus gets sort of the political and economic favors he needs from the Senate. Pompey gets land for his soldiers, which he needs. And Caesar gets himself, after he finishes his consulship, he gets himself appointed as provincial governor in Gaul, in Cisalpine Gaul, I think. So Caesar goes up north to what we know as kind of France and Spain. He picks a fight with the Gauls and proceeds to fight a war with them. Okay, and so these are kind of the people that are native to France and Spain. So this is really before France is France and Spain is Spain, and so the people that are living there are basically called Celts or Gauls by the Romans. But Caesar picks a fight with them and proceeds to fight a 10-year-long war, conquering most of France and Spain. It's estimated that he killed about 1 million people in that war, 1 million Gauls. And keep in mind, he killed these people basically for his own glory, right? He was trying to establish himself as a great military commander and gain the loyalty of his troops. So he fights this war not necessarily because the Gauls are dangerous, not necessarily because the Gauls attack. He kind of attacks them and then proceeds to fight them for a long time in order to win himself glory. So, how does this whole thing come apart? A couple things happen. So Caesar's daughter Julia is actually married to Pompey. Caesar's daughter is married to Pompey. Julius Caesar's daughter dies in childbirth, which of course was quite common in those days. And Crassus, we see Crassus is killed. And so he's off on campaign fighting the Parthians. The Parthians manage to kill Crassus. And so when those two things happen, once Crassus is dead and Caesar's daughter Julia is dead, there's really nothing to connect Pompey anymore. So Caesar is up in Gaul fighting a war. and still becoming popular in Rome because he's sending written accounts back of his heroic pursuits. Pompey is back in Rome, but these two guys are now vying for power. Okay. So yeah, this whole thing comes apart after the death of Crassus and the death of Caesar's daughter, Julia. Yeah. So now there is, okay. So now things get really exciting. So Caesar's command is over, right? So we said that the Senate gives provincial governors a certain term, and so Caesar's term as governor in Gaul is over, and the Senate is saying, okay, Caesar, come on back. But what happens? So Jimmy says here, the Senate under the leadership of Pompey informed Caesar that his command had expired and demanded that he surrender his army. Yes. So what's supposed to happen here is that generals are supposed to come back into Italy, they give up their army, they lose their power, and they come back into Rome. But that's going to be a problem for Caesar because Caesar owes a lot of money back in Rome, and there's a lot of people who would like to take him to court in order to get that money from him. And B, Pompey is there, and Pompey is now an enemy of Caesar. So if Caesar walks back into Rome without his army, he's just a regular guy, right? And so people can take him to court, or maybe more frighteningly for Caesar, Pompey's thugs might kill him as he walks back in because he'll have no special status, right? He'll just be a regular guy when he comes back. He tries to run for the consulship while in Gaul because if he comes back as consul, nobody can touch him, but they don't allow that to happen. And so Caesar has two options, right? He can either surrender his army and walk back into Rome and hope nobody drags him off to court or murders him in the streets, or he can bring his army back in with him. And again, that's exactly what he does. He marches his army on Rome, just like Sulla did before, and wages war on Pompey. And so for a while, in around 49-48 BCE, Pompey and Caesar are fighting a civil war, first in Rome, then in southern Italy, and then the fight actually leads to Egypt. And so what happens here? Well, Jimmy says Caesar and Pompey fight one last time at Pharsalus in northern Greece, and Caesar's army defeated Pompey's larger but disorganized army. And then Pompey flees to Egypt, right? But unfortunately for Pompey, he doesn't have any friends in Egypt, and the pharaoh of Egypt at the time, Ptolemy VIII, I think, kills Pompey and gives his head to Caesar when Caesar arrives. So, whoops, Pompey seems to have trusted the wrong guy and is assassinated, and Caesar is victorious. So Caesar's army managed to defeat Pompey's. Yes, good. They fought. Pompey flees to Egypt, and yeah, he gets killed. Treachery, right? He gets killed by Ptolemy the third. No, the 8th. Nope, the 13th. Sorry, Ptolemy the 13th. Caesar, even though Ptolemy murders Pompey for him, Caesar seems to cozy up to Ptolemy's sister Cleopatra, who probably all of us have heard of because she's very famous. And it seems that they have a son, right? They have a son named Caesarion. Okay, so Pompey's dead, the civil war is pretty much over, and Caesar returns to Rome victorious, right? So he comes back, and then what happens? So Thika says here that there's two options for him, the Marius model and the Sulla model. And that's what Jimmy says too, right? There are two models of leadership for him here. That's what everyone says. Okay, so there's two models of leadership. So Caesar can either try to get himself elected as consul over and over and over again, which is difficult and a little bit unstable, or he can make himself dictator. So as the textbook mentions, he starts out winning consulships. Eventually he has himself promoted dictator for in perpetuity, without end, which again is a total perversion of Roman custom and law, right? Remember, dictators were only for when the state was under threat, right? If somebody was attacking Rome, you would appoint a dictator for 6 months, and the dictator would do whatever he had to do in order to safeguard Rome and defeat the enemy. And then when the threat was over, he would give up his power as dictator, and the republic would function as normal. But here, we have no threat to Rome, right? Nobody's attacking Rome. And Caesar has himself made dictator in perpetuity, forever and ever. So this is totally, Roman custom and law has been thrown out the window as Caesar takes control of the whole thing. Now, an interesting thing happens. For Caesar at a Roman festival called the Lupercal. And the Lupercal celebrates the origin of Rome. So if you remember, there's Remus and Romulus and the she-wolf that raises them. The Lupercal festival celebrates this kind of origin story of Rome. And so at the Lupercal, Caesar is there, dictator for life, and he's standing before the people, and his friend, Mark Antony, takes a crown and goes to put it onto the head of Caesar, okay? And so at that point, the crowd, who was wildly cheering for Caesar, everybody kind of goes quiet, and they're a little unsure. And so Caesar pushes Mark Antony away, pushes away the crown, and the crowd goes wild, okay? And so, again, Mark Antony tries to put the crown on Caesar's head. And again, the crowd gets really quiet. And so again, Mark Antony is pushed away by Caesar. And I think they might do this a third time as well. Mark Antony goes to put the crown on Caesar. The crowd goes really quiet. And then Caesar pushes him away. Now, it's not really clear what's going on here, okay? It's not really clear whether Caesar was trying to crown himself king of Rome and seeing how people would react. It's not clear if Caesar was trying to show how noble he was, like he didn't want to become king, and so he was going to show the people how selfless he was by pushing away the crown. It's not entirely clear what Caesar was trying to do, but there was this event at the Lupercal where his friend Mark Antony tried to put a crown on Caesar. The crowd got really uncomfortable because, again, remember, the Romans don't like kings, right? They have this really negative idea toward kings that goes back hundreds of years. So everybody gets really quiet and uncomfortable. Caesar pushes away the crown, and the crowd goes wild, right? So the crowd's happy, but the optimates, so a small group of senators, are not happy at all because they see this and they think, okay, this guy is trying to this guy's going to try and make himself king. This is what's going on. He's going to seize total power forever and ever, and the republic will end. And so his rule is, Caesar is going to be brought to an end. So what brings his rule to an end? And Karen, I'm going to answer your question really quickly here. Yeah, Mark Antony is a friend of Caesar. He's a little bit younger. He's younger than Caesar. And Mark Antony is going to get involved in a civil war for power after Caesar dies. He's going to wind up in Egypt, just like Pompey did. And yeah, he's gonna hook up with Cleopatra. That's gonna happen. But yeah, it's the same Mark Antony. So what brings his rule to an end? There's a couple answers here, but I'm not going to put them up because there's something that happens before any of those two things. So Jimmy and Thika, those things happen a little bit later, but there's something else that brings Caesar's rule to an end. What brings his rule to an end, and him, and what brings Caesar to an end? What brings Caesar to an end? Yes, Karen, but that was earlier, right? His daughter dies in. She probably dies about 6 or 7 years before that. Also, while we're talking about this, keep in mind, contrast this with other civilizations, how much we know about Rome, because they wrote things down, right? Remember the Indus River civilization, where all I could show you was, ruins and some writing that we couldn't read, and that was almost all we knew. Here we have very detailed information about what all of these guys did in every year of their life, and who the consuls were, and where they went, and what battles they won, and even a little bit of what their personality was like. We know a huge amount about a civilization like this because, again, so much was written. And again, contrast that with civilizations where they didn't really write anything down and we don't know much of anything. Come on, guys, this is an easy one. This is the only thing that most people actually know about Caesar. Although if you're in Canada, there's a drink named after him, right? There's a Bloody Caesar, Clamato juice, vodka, celery in it, some celery salt around the rim, and a lime. It's a Caesar. What brings him to the end, though? What brings his career and his life to the end? To an end. Here we go. So Pearlie says this, yeah, the final straw is a group of 60 senators who feared Caesar aimed to make himself king. Right, so again, the senators see that sort of bit of political theater at the Lupercal. They're not really sure what that's about, but basically somebody tried to put a crown on Caesar's head, and so some of these senators start to worry that he's going to try to make himself king somehow, and so yeah, they ambush him in the Senate and they stab him to death. The sources say he was stabbed about 60 times. So this is a pretty aggressive and violent murder that happens. And quite famously, his friend is there. And so this is where that name Brutus comes back. And so remember, I pointed the finger at Brutus a couple times early on because there's a Brutus, there's a... I can't remember his first names, but there's a Brutus who is one of the one of the guys who helps kick out the Etruscan king, right? The Etruscan king Tarquin. And here, 500 years later, is his great 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 grandson, Marcus Junius Brutus, who is there again, apparently liberating Rome from a king, right? So he's in there stabbing Caesar as well, which is kind of tragic because Brutus was actually a friend of Caesar. And you see in the textbook, Brutus is actually listed in Caesar's will. So he was actually a close friend of, Brutus was a close friend of Caesar. And so there's this kind of very classic, I'm not sure if this actually happened, but the story goes is that Caesar is being stabbed, and then he sees one of his murderers is Brutus, and he quite famously says, "Et tu, Brute," you too, Brutus. And so his friend murders him in the Senate, I guess trying to uphold his family legacy of fighting for the Republic against the king, against the tyrant. So, yeah, talk about backstabbing. I'm not sure if it was in the back, but not literally, but definitely metaphorically. Yeah, so Caesar is murdered, right? And so after that happens, the liberators, or the optimates, however you want to call them, they come out of the Senate and they say, Caesar is dead, we have restored the Republic. Which is ridiculous, because they didn't restore anything. All of the existing problems that were there in terms of why the Republic wasn't working well, they were still there. You just killed Caesar. That doesn't change anything. And indeed, it doesn't change anything, because as soon as you kill him, a civil war erupts, trying to fight for power. And so again, when Brutus and his friends come out and say, we have restored the Republic, the people don't cheer. The people run to their homes and bolt their doors shut, because they know that trouble is coming. At least under Caesar, things were relatively peaceful, right? Because nobody was fighting him for control. But now Caesar's dead, there's a power vacuum, and people are going to try to gain control. And that's exactly what happens. And so you have another conflict. You have another civil war after Caesar dies. So again, Caesar is murdered, but the Republic is not restored. All that's happened is one man has died, quite famously. Okay, we've been working hard. Let's take a quick 10-minute break, come back, and then I have a couple videos to show you, and yeah, we'll do that. But take a break, stretch your legs. See you in 10 minutes. Okay, and we're back. So. Right, Caesar, Caesar is dead, right? So, Caesar marches on. Well, actually, maybe I've got some slides on this. Let's go to the slides for a second here. Right. So there's a triumvirate, right? So late in the Roman Republic, there are a three-way alliance between these powerful, greedy, glory-hungry guys, right? We've got Crassus here, kind of an older guy, but a successful general. We've got Pompey, a younger general, but also thirsty for glory. And then we have Julius Caesar, who's kind of the new guy on the block, but it gets elected consul. And all of these guys team up to help each other out and further their financial and political goals, right? So Caesar becomes consul, and after his year as consul, he gets himself appointed as governor of these three provinces, I guess. Sorry, I was mistaken. So Cisalpine Gaul, Illyricum, and Transalpine Gaul. And so he's in command of a Roman army, and he goes up there and subdues the Gauls. Again, the Gauls aren't really dangerous or a problem, but Caesar picks a fight with them anyway so that he can gain glory. And so he basically wages war against the Gauls for 10 years, kills about 1 million of them apparently, all in order to further his own goals. But of course, we read that Crassus is killed in battle against a Parthian king. Pompey's wife, Julia, died. And if I recall, actually, Pompey, even though that marriage was kind of a political alliance, Pompey actually loved Julia, and they actually had a good marriage, apparently. But tragically, Julia will die. And again, this alliance then collapses and makes enemies of Caesar and Pompey. So Caesar is very successful and victorious in Gaul. And of course, Pompey is at home in Rome. And so at the end of Caesar's command, the Senate, led by Pompey, orders Caesar to give up his command and come back to Rome because his term is over. But of course, that's going to be very dangerous for Caesar, right? Like I mentioned, Caesar is in debt. And if he comes back just as a normal guy, people can haul him off to court and sue him for all the money that he owes. But if he's an elected magistrate, that can't happen. He has immunity. But again, he also has enemies in Rome, particularly Pompey. And there's some extra detail here about Marius and Cinna, and we don't need to worry about those guys. So he could return to Rome, but he's probably going to be hauled off to court. He's probably going to go to jail, or if he's really unlucky, Pompey is going to kill him. And so, as I mentioned here, Caesar goes for option C. He doesn't surrender his command and instead illegally marches on Rome. A civil war ensues, of course. These two, Pompey and Caesar, fight it out for a few years before Pompey flees to Egypt, gets himself murdered, and Caesar returns to Rome and is appointed dictator for life in 48 BCE. And so at this time, as I think you read already, Caesar creates a will, and in his will, he names his not sole beneficiary, but main beneficiary. And again, he picks this grand nephew of his, Gaius Octavius. And so, as they mention in the text, Caesar doesn't have any legitimate children of his own. And so he leaves his estate, he leaves his property, and maybe most importantly, he leaves his name, the name of Caesar. He leaves it to Gaius Octavius, who at the time in 48 BC is like a 15-year-old kid. Okay? More about him later. So again, Caesar returns to Rome, and is basically the head guy. He makes a number of reforms. As it turns out, he's actually not a bad leader. He does a lot of good things for Rome. The people certainly support him. And so as an administrator, as a government leader of Rome, he's actually pretty good. So he sets in motion a bunch of social and governmental reforms. He creates the Julian calendar. He names a month after himself, July. So last month is actually named after our friend Julius Caesar here. Gives citizenship to far regions of the Roman Empire. Does some land reform. And does some centralization of the bureaucracy, which of course focuses power in his hands. Sorry, I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit here because there's a lot of detail. And actually, we've talked about some of this already. But again, all of these changes that Caesar is making makes some elite senators very suspicious and very nervous. And so on March 15th, 44 BCE, we even know the date, a group of senators murder him on the floor of the Senate, right? They smuggle in daggers and they stab him to death some 60 times. 23 times. The 60 is, I guess, the number of men who stabbed him to death. After Caesar is murdered, they cremate his body, and a temple is actually erected there later. And you can actually go to that same place in Rome today. It's still there. If you want to see where Caesar was cremated, it's still there. All right. Okay. So I have two quick videos for you to watch. And so I'm just going to post them in Student Portal. And so one kind of talks about how we should view the murder of Caesar, and how we should view Brutus, his friend Brutus. And the second one is just for fun. So for the first video, I've got a few questions, 2 or 3 questions for you to answer, and that's in Microsoft Teams. The second video is just good. And it's a performance from Shakespeare's play, Julius Caesar. And it's actor Damian Lewis giving the eulogy at Caesar's funeral. And so I'm just putting it in there because it's such a good performance. It's awesome. So what I'll do then is I'll give you 10 minutes, watch both videos. There's just a few questions to answer. They're really easy. And I'll see you back here in 10 minutes and we'll talk about what we've seen. Okay, so go to Microsoft Teams. The links and the questions are there. See you in 10. Okay, and we're back. So, how good was that, right? In terms of performances? Oof. Good one. I think I might just ask you one question because we're a little short on time. I guess one question, how good was that performance on a scale of like 9 to 10? Because it was awesome. But maybe I'll ask you this one. Why do you think this chapter of history is so well known, right? Almost everybody knows about the murder of Caesar, right? On the Ides of March, he gets stabbed. Most people know that, even if they know nothing about Rome. Why do you think that is? Why do you think this episode or detail of history is so famous or so important? Maybe not even important, but why do people know about it? Okay, well, Sam says because people don't really know what or why it happened. Well, I think we kind of do, right? We know exactly what happened. And I think in some ways we know why, right? The video we saw says that, obviously Brutus had a difficult choice to make, right? Between his personal loyalties and maybe between the good of Rome, not to mention his family legacy. So we don't necessarily know what was going on in his head, but we know what happened and we kind of know why. Karen says it was a scandal. Well, it's definitely an exciting event, right? Although again, not the first Roman politician to be murdered in the Senate, right? We know Tiberius Sempronius Gracchus was killed almost 100 years earlier in the same place, right? Just beaten to death with whatever they could find lying around. Pearlie says the irony in the story, Brutus thought they killed Caesar for good, but instead it was the end of the Republic. Yeah, I guess that might make it kind of an interesting story, right? The video points out it's an unintended consequence, right? The Roman senators are worried about one man taking power, and so they kill him. But the result of that after another civil war is that one man takes power. And so either their murder of Caesar brings about brings about the end of the Republic, or the Republic was going to end anyway, and didn't really matter what they did, right? Killing Caesar didn't make a difference. But either way, it did not have the effect. The outcome was not what those senators were trying for, right? Casey says because conflict between loyalty and universal ideas becomes relevant. Yeah, so Brutus here has an awkward choice to make, right? He has personal loyalty. He's a friend of Caesar, yet he also feels he has this duty to the Republic. And again, particularly because he comes from this family of their legacy is protecting the Roman people against the tyrant, right? Overthrowing the king and standing up for the Republic. And here, before him, Brutus sees another king. And what is he to do? He has his personal loyalty, and he has what his kind of conscience and his part of his conscience and sort of the legacy of his family, what that dictates that he has to do. So he has a very difficult choice to make. Maybe one last thing I'll say here too is that I don't know if any of you are thinking this. Maybe you can let me know if you are. But to me, a lot of the things that are happening here at the end of the Roman Republic are very closely analogous to what's happening in the United States today, right? We see a lot of chaos. We see a lot of social upheaval. We see powerful people making decisions based on their own desire for power and glory, and not so much for the good of the United States or the good of the people. And so I don't know if you're thinking this, but today and in the class on Friday, I feel like there's a lot of sort of similarities between these two periods in history right now and the end of the Roman Republic approximately 2,000 years ago. But maybe that's something that we can explore in a little more detail tomorrow. And also tomorrow we'll look at these things here. So some people provided, like Jimmy mentioned, Octavian, and we'll talk about him tomorrow because he's going to become important. But I think until that time, do you have any questions or things that you want to say or ask or state before we wrap it up? Okay, so Sam's good. Pearlie's good. Cindy's good. Carmen's good. Rashid is good. Well, I'll leave it there. So come back tomorrow. We'll see the official end of the Roman Republic. We'll see how we transition from this kind of vaguely democratic structure into a situation where one man can rule the empire. And we'll kind of see how that goes and figure out how to kind of end this. And then maybe, what's tomorrow? Tomorrow's Wednesday. Maybe on Thursday we'll try to come up with some sort of thing that ties everything together and makes sense of this whole course. At least I hope so. So I'll leave it there for today. For those of you who participated in the live chat, thank you very much. You did a good job. Have a lovely afternoon, and I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, so bye.